In Uganda, the continuous practice of trying civilians before military courts has been one that has ignited a great deal of controversy, especially in regards to the principles of due process, fair trial, and adherence to basic international human rights standards. Now, the question as we go forward and examine the legal and human rights implications of this matter is whether is the basic impact on on all our modes of life, from our economic, social, and political angles, what it has played into the public perception of the military. So with me in studio today, I've had a very illustrious panel to dissect this matter, and I shall introduce them from my extreme left rather, coming in. First of all, Miss Nancy Ayot. I finally got it right, I think.
Yes, you did.
A feminist lawyer and writer. Nancy, it is a pleasure. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me again this year.
Yeah. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you so much.
You know, it's always something once you get the writers out of their hole, you know they have something great to say. And right next to me, an exceptionally brilliant lady, a lawyer as well, Miss Theresa Tumwesigye, as well as a communication specialist. Welcome, Theresa.
Thank you for having me.
I know we're going to do extremely brilliantly.
I'm very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, the standards have been raised. So, moving straight into the discussion today, we've had quite a bit going on in regards to the military court-martial. And most recent of all, we have had Dr. Kizza Besigye being brought to trial for the military court-martial. I would say he was quote-unquote extradited from Kenya, because I do not know the adherence to the principles of extradition, but he was extradited from Kenya and brought to the military court in Uganda, and right now he's currently on trial. So the question I have to you, Nancy, first of all, as we start, is basically, can you help us to understand the legal basis the Ugandan government has utilized in a layman's terms to justify the trial of civilians in the military court? How does this align with the human rights standards in our constitution? And have you noticed a particular pattern in the kinds of cases that have been brought before the court martial?
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to answer this question by referring to our history, really. The history of Uganda is one that is even quoted in our constitution. They say we've had a very turbulent history of military coups and all that. And therefore, when the framers of the Constitution sat down, the Odoki Commission in the Constituent Assembly, when they sat down, the question of the militarism came up, really, and they wanted to understand the powers of the court-martial and how its regulation works. But one of the major questions that came out was whether they had authority to try civilians, because like I said, we refer to our history, and this is not the first time that this is happening. It happened in previous regimes, and it was not well regulated. And for the first time, people sat down and said, after this mess that we've been through, let's sit down and try to put our house together, the Constituent Assembly, and that's how the 1995 Constitution came up. But let me just say that the question of trial of civilians in military courts was not the only one. They also talked about the jurisdiction of military courts over non-service officers, the protection of the principles of especially concerning the protection of the principle of double jeopardy, because people are supposed to be tried for the same offenses twice in civil courts and then in military courts, because that was some of the concerns. And then also they asked whether the court-martial were courts of judicature, whether they were supposed to be, because this was a thing. Because as we know, the military has its own structures, it has its own regulations, and that is not something I can speak much about because it is outside my realm. However, the Constitution, as you should know, does not expressly talk about the court-martial. Under Article 129, it provides for the courts of judicature to include the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and its subordinates. Yes, but it does not expressly talk about the court-martial. And also some of some of the main components of the constitution, while talking about the military, is that it focuses on the fact that it must have a human rights approach to dealing with civilians, but also it talks about the regulation of military courts through parliament. I mean, of the military, army officers, police, just the forces really, through the parliament. And finally, in 2005, we had the passing of the UPDF Act, and it came into force in September. And under Section 119 of the UPDF Act, it talks there are people who can be subject to military law, to include persons serving, and then those who collude to commit crimes of service.
Yeah.
Yes, among others, really. Now the question here is about its jurisdiction over civilians, and I say on good authority that through the years, with the different laws that have come in and the cases, including the arrest of Kizza Besigye earlier on in his career as a politician when he had just started, they said that the military courts have no authority to try civilians because he was an ex-serviceman, but now he was a civilian, and the cases had to be dismissed over time because that is when people say the judiciary still had a thing with the people, when people still had trust that the judiciary had the heart of the people, the heart of the people. But now I believe that the trend now is that the persons being tried under with the court under the court martial, let me just say that the court martial consists of different courts. There is the field court martial, division court martial, general court martial appeal, and the persons that are being tried by the court martial, really, the general court martial or the field court martial, are usually persons involved in opposing the government. And I'm not saying this just because I don't like the government or something like that. It's just a trend that I noticed. But you find that some people come up, they're trumped up charges of terrorism, and then people are rounded up and arrested, and they're taken to the court martial, and then at the end of the day, they stay in jail for so long because the prosecution is still looking for evidence. And you know, in law school they told us that before you get the evidence, no one is being arrested. But somehow this happens, that there is no clear evidence. Someone is suspected, they're rounded up, they're arrested, they're thrown somewhere. Some people, they don't know who actually took them, and the military says, oh, but we have this person. Or they find out later on that the military has this person, and they're presented before the court martial for possession of firearms, because, and things like that. I think that this being the election year, 2025, I like to call it the election year because we have the whole year to campaign, to see the campaigns, to see our presidential candidates, who are the key players really in these things come up. And I believe that the election year sees these things, or the years consequent to the election year and after, especially when we are dealing with cases to deal with maybe stealing of votes and all that stuff. You find that a lot of people that oppose the government are arrested, and arbitrarily, and they end up in these situations. It's not the first time, like I said. So I believe that the trend is that it's just persons who are against the opposition of the government. And because I have never met a high profile case of maybe a person in the government who is being tried for possession, and some of them admittedly said they have guns.
Very interesting. Very interesting, Nancy. But you've answered the interface with the league with the constitution. You've well answered the pattern of cases that we have seen before this trial. But tell us, what is the military saying is their justification for trying these individuals? What is the government telling us is their rationale behind this process? How have they justified this?
I think they've justified this thing under the perception that these are persons who are treasonous towards the government, really. Persons trying to overthrow the government, by soliciting for firearms and all that, because Dr. Besigye was accused of going out of Uganda to solicit for firearms. You see, and you know, it makes me wonder, because this did not even happen within the borders of the country, and somehow he's being accused of that, and it's very complicated, because I feel like a lot of these things are about power. Really, it's not about what is legitimate. It's about who has the power to do what. And if we can detain this person and no one can do anything about it, we have the power to do this. That, in my opinion, that's what's happening.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then thank you so much, Nancy. Brilliant introduction to this conversation. I think the stage has been wonderfully set. Theresa, I'll bring you in to take up the next act on this stage. So, we have understood essentially what is happening with the military courts. We have understood how they're progressing. Can you maybe give us an idea as to the long-term effects of this thing? Well, Nancy has relayed to us that constitutionally there is no basis for trying civilians before the military court martial. She has relayed to us the pattern of the cases that we are seeing. She has relayed to us how it's interfacing with our local and international human rights standards, because those two might not completely align. But what do you anticipate is the long-term effect of this on the judiciary itself, on people's perception as well as basically the legal system in Uganda? And then also, before you take us into that, do you believe that there's individuals that have been placed before the court martial have gotten the adequate legal representation that they ought to have had?
Okay.
In regards to this, because you know there's you going before a court, and then there's you. One of our rights is to have, in regards to fair trial, is to have adequate legal representation. Has this been achieved? And then you can take us into the rest about the long-term effects of it. What exactly does it look like for us as a country if we continue doing it in a manner that is quote unquote unconstitutional?
Okay, before we get there, I'd like to maybe say a little bit about what she was saying.
Please.
Looking at the patterns, for me, this is not an isolated event, but also I will say that ordinarily civilians are not subjected to military courts, right, or military law. And that being said first, the General Court Martial is a legitimate court established by the UPDF Act, which was obviously enacted by Parliament, which is the lawmaking body in this country. So we have the General Court Martial, because she mentioned all the courts martial. So section 119, which talks about persons subjected to military law, I see civilians coming in under subsection H, which says, read it verbatim here, summarized, every person found in unlawful possession of arms, ammunition, or equipment ordinarily being the monopoly of the defense forces. I will say, if I look at this section and I interpret it literally, civilians can be tried in the military courts. Because if you have guns, yes, there are people who have guns.
Yes.
Civilians who have guns, which are duly registered.
Duly registered and authorized.
Duly registered, authorized. The police where you live know you have this gun. They know what kind of gun it is, how many bullets you have in this gun. And you have to keep report, as far as I know, of course, not everyone is equal. But people who legitimately carry arms as civilians or maybe former service members, there are checks that they go through regularly about those firearms that they hold. So it's not just that, I believe it's not just that someone has a gun and they have a gun and they're special. It's not about that. There are certain restrictions that even you, if you have a gun, you must adhere to. I know a person who had a gun. It was duly registered. Every few months they would report to the police station and say, this is still the gun, this is still the same gun, serial number is still the same, I had these bullets when I got this gun, these are still the number of bullets, I haven't killed anybody. You know, they look at the gun, check it, is it fine? Fine. And then later, when this person's children were growing up, and you know, kids can be chaotic, they could fight and, I'm going to kill you, go and get your father's gun and you kill your friend. No. This person handed over the gun to police. It's really as simple as that. But which is why they're saying unlawful possession. If it is unlawful, it is unlawful. It's clear. And usually, why would you unlawfully have arms? Are you trying to kill people? Are you trying to overthrow the government? Because as lawyers, you know Kelson's theory. I mean, coups have happened, and it begins with guns usually. So I think this is a sensible protection, and I believe that if you illegally have guns that you're not supposed to have, you're bringing yourself under the jurisdiction of the UPDF Act, and therefore bringing yourself under the jurisdiction of military law, which means you could be tried in the court-martial. That is how I see it.
That's a very interesting point that you make. Another point, one of the things that Nancy said is that the UPDF is it's a thing out of itself with its own systems and its own structures, which as a civilian we have not interfaced with.
Yes.
To an intimate level, and these systems and structures leak into the court-martial. They play a fundamental role in it. So, even in regards to how the process, how the trials are conducted, who is the legal officer in charge of your case? If I, as a civilian, have not interfaced or have no knowledge of these systems and structures, you know, the UPDF Act obviously establishes it. But as like an individual yourself,
yes,
do you believe we're still in the right place?
I believe so, yes, to an extent.
Tell us more.
I will say that, I mean, it is a military institution, of course. And ordinarily, as human beings, something that you don't understand or you don't regularly interface with is going to be scary, especially the military. Could be seen as something scary. One could put forward and say, oh, Uganda's tumultuous history with the military, or the defense forces or security forces, generally, you know, the bloody history that we have had in previous regimes, maybe Amin time, during Amin's regime. So you could say, we are scared of the military. But being scared of the military is not going to give you answers that you want. And we all know ignorance is no defense. So, unfortunately, of course, there are certain things that a regular civilian is not going to really bother with. People want to wake up in the morning safely, get to work safely, or go about their day safely, come back home, talk to their families, live a peaceful life. You know, try to see how to make money, how to move forward, you know, how to secure a future for themselves and their children. That is all really we're concerned about. And there are very few instances that could bring a person like you and myself to court-martial. That's why I'm saying, if you choose to have a firearm, why do you have a firearm? If you want to have a gun, have it lawfully, it is possible. And it could, I understand it could be seen as maybe I'm defending a thing that's not defendable, but...
I have a question. You seem to be coming to this discussion from the basis of an assumption of guilt.
No,
Presumption of guilt.
not at all. Not at all. The court process is, they don't bring you to court because you're guilty. They bring you to court because there's a suspicion. And it is you that... Yeah, certain evidence. Of course, I'm constrained in speaking about that evidence. I'm not a police officer who does the arresting. I'm not a military officer who gathers the evidence, right? But I'm just talking about, let's say someone is accused of stealing a chicken, right? Now let's maybe bring it back a little bit. You've been accused of stealing a chicken, and okay, people are saying every time you're in this area, you know, in this car village, Every time you're in this area, chickens are disappearing. But when you're not around, everyone is living peacefully. People are going about their poultry business peacefully. Nothing is wrong. But every time you step into that place, chickens are disappearing and people's businesses are suffering. So people report you to a police station and be like, this person really, you guys need to look into this because we suspect this guy has been stealing our chickens. Of course, people who report you believe that you are guilty. But the whole purpose of the reporting is to set in motion a certain series of things, of actions, that eventually, if all goes well, you end up getting a fair hearing, and then the judiciary will decide, are you guilty or not, right? So I'm just saying, the fact that certain actions that you do or you're suspected of certain actions, those are the ones that are going to set in motion a certain thing which will include a trial, and at the end of it all, they will decide, are you guilty? If yes, you are sentenced to whatever it is that they decide, or you're acquitted, and that is the end. So this is the same thing that I'm saying here in terms of the military court. You are suspected of having firearms, and I believe that the Ugandan military is strong. You know that it has done a lot to bring peace to the region. That is undeniable.
That is true.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
And that cannot be done by a weak army. Yeah, I mean, if you say so.
Yeah.
It can be, that cannot be done by a weak military, that cannot be done by weak intelligence services. So I'm not a person in intelligence. I don't know what basis they go on to say this person has arms. I'm not even just talking about this current Besigye case.
Yeah.
I am talking also about the Besigye trial. I mean, the first time, that was 2006, I was in primary school. That case, I followed it very closely, even in primary school. So I can see that there could be a basis or not. I don't know. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a military person. I'm not in intelligence. But I'm just saying that I do give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what sources they use to come up and say this person has guns or they don't. I cannot say whether they have guns or they don't. I'm constrained in saying that, but I'm saying my point is this. You are suspected of something, or maybe you have done something. That action that you've allegedly done is going to set in motion certain activities that at the end of it all will decide, are you guilty or not?
That is very, 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 very interesting. I like the angle with which you're coming to this conversation. It is something that is not normally agreed upon by most of society, that the military might have a place in all this. And that is true. We cannot deny that. But then, it's something of an isolated unit. Even from the checks and balances. For instance, let's just use a case study. The Besigye trial. The gentleman is in Kenya. He has lawfully crossed the border. There is nothing of that sort. One day, what his wife says, he's bundled in a vehicle. Allegedly bundled in a vehicle, crossed, which is not an allegation. He is definitely crossed across the border.
He's here.
We have a guy, and there's no process in regards to extradition, like the legal framework in regards to extradition that was followed to get him here. Now he's before the military court martial on allegations of holding firearms, and yet from the get-go, the process that brought him before that court martial was not legal in nature. That can be something that is agreed upon, because I think in law school, one of the things that they teach us, I think it was in year 3, is extradition. Just the basics of extradition, and that was not adhered to. And so, what are the checks and balances you have for a system that is, operating in its own, within its own structures, that has a history of a legal system that has a history of not being entirely legal? So what are the checks and balances you have? Because as a civilian, that is, if I were to be brought before the court martial, for my own peace of mind, for the public's perception of this system to be high, I need to know that this is a check and balance that has been, followed. As like the judge in that case, for instance, ought to have something ought to have been done. Red flags ought to have been waved in his mind in regards to the process. But were those flags? Does it seem like those flags were waved?
I will say with the limited knowledge that I have about how the General Court Martial runs, it is very clear. It's not, even when, actually I will say they are lenient when it comes to civilians in court, but hypothetically, but also this is what happens. It's very clear, it doesn't waste time. The law is clear, this is the law. Have you done the thing or have you not done the thing? If you've done the thing, the evidence says you've done the thing, testimony is there to say you've done the thing, you are sentenced very quickly. There's no time to waste, whether you're a military officer or not. But I will say with civilians, from what I see, they kind of tend to be more lenient because they understand that we don't really understand their system. So they try to labor to, go a lot of back and forth, even allowing cameras, How does it happen? In a military court, So I will see that as something that they are trying to kind of see a civilian angle, but at the end of the day, it's a military court. And like I said, certain things that set that process in motion are suspected actions or things that have been done. And I would have to wait to hear what evidence they bring. I'm not the judge advocate. I'm not a member of the court. I can have my own opinion, but just look at the evidence that they bring and what decision they come to, and then see if they decide like they did in the 2006 cases and beyond, because this matter actually even went up to the Supreme Court of whether civilians should be charged in a military court. Like I told you before this began, I am a bit constrained in giving my opinion because it could be a bit contrary to what I saw the Supreme Court say. But there are certain actions that will bring you within the ambit of the court-martial. And also, you asked about legal representation. Let me try to kind of weave in and out of this thing. Legal representation, I believe that they have legal representation because even the military officers themselves who are tried in the court-martial has a prosecution office and a defense office. So even if you're a little private from nowhere and you've committed an offense, you're going to have people defending you. And as a civilian, you have the option to appoint your own counsel, like Besigye has done,
Well, it was a very shaky process, wasn't it, to get Martha to get the adequate, I think she's the first person we have had in the country managed to get the practicing certificate. Am I correct? From the law council.
Non-Ugandan?
Yeah,
it happens frequently, actually.
It
does happen, but we cannot ignore the political nature of this case.
Yes.
And also we cannot deny the fact that, I will say this take it with a grain of salt, but maybe when Besigye was there, he was there she was involved in the thing he had gone to do, right?
He had gone to
a book launch, yes. So you can see how tricky it is. If I come to your house to visit you and I hear you make very good eshabwe, and I come to your house to eat good eshabwe, but then the people in my own house are saying when she went there she was committing crimes. But I'm committing crimes at whose home? At your home, when I've allegedly come to eat eshabwe. You can see how sticky it's going to be for the people in my own family to actually now let you come and defend me. It's like, are you in cahoots? But take that or leave it. Also, it's a political case. It is kind of political. It's been politicized. People could argue for different reasons why they think it's going on, but that's not for me to say. I will say, though, that civilians in military courts have adequate legal representation. I will say that. I spoke to a civilian about this matter, actually, and I got their perspective. It's quite interesting. So,
public perception.
Yes. So they were juxtaposing the civilian courts versus the court-martial, and this person is intimately aware of both sides. So, to paraphrase what they said DPP is the checkpoint when a person is arrested. You know, you suspected really been stealing chickens. When you come, chickens disappear. Police arrests you. You know, the DPP through the state attorneys or wherever you are comes in to check this case. Should it continue or should it just be dismissed at this point? It doesn't hold any water. Let's throw it out, or this can actually be a case, and they give the go ahead for police to do investigations and institute a case against you. So now you see we have two levels. We have police now, then the DPP comes in, and then eventually certain things are happening, you get to a court, and then now you have another independent party, judiciary. You know, a magistrate or a judge is going to say, based on the evidence that's been presented by police, this person is guilty or not guilty, and then, you know, we move forward from there. So we have several levels in the civilian courts. This is what I would think people expect. People think court is supposed to run like that, but the court martial is different, because like I said, certain things you do are going to bring you in their jurisdiction, and it's a different set of things that is going to happen. So this person tells me that in the court martial, those divisions are not there of police, DPP, magistrate, and then other people that are holding you if you're sentenced to a custodial, you know, custodial sentence or whatever. Now they said everything is done by one body, the military. Arrested, you know, they tried by them. They are the arrester, they are the prosecutor, and they are the judge. You see, and now this person posits that the neutrality comes into question. The neutrality of the process comes into question because there is no division inherently, and that this could be seen to deny the principle of justice and impartiality. It is interesting to hear from a civilian because it kind of makes sense. You began by saying that the military is something that's not really well understood. And I think a lot of us don't take time to understand them, or to actually look at the UPDF Act. It is quite interesting. It's really, really interesting. So I can see why they would say that. Because here you're saying, okay, this person is a different person. The one who's sentencing me saying I'm a chicken thief is not the very person who arrested me or is looking for evidence, right? But you're seeing people in uniform here. They know the law, that's for sure. And they're telling you, the person who arrested you was in an army uniform. The person who is interrogating you is in an army uniform. The one that's in court is in an army uniform. The one sentencing you is in a uniform. So it could be seen to just be one blanket thing that's sentencing you, and I can see why they have those concerns. So it is interesting. So I would say long term, I think we decide what the long term is going to be. I think we decide what the long term is going to be. I don't think we are passive players. And I think what we can do as civilians is try to understand a bit more about these things. Like, step away from the sensationalism, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I would say that, yeah.
You have made very valid points. One of the things before I move on to Nancy is about the politicized aspect, right? Politicized aspects usually fall primarily under the executive, right? The UPDF as well would fall primarily under the executive as well. The appointments, promotions, everything by the executive.
Commander-in-chief.
Yeah, some would even say that contravenes, especially when you bring in a civilian who is not under, hasn't put themselves under this particular reach. We might say, something about the law is that it might exist, but is it right? And that might be a conversation we also need to have as a country. It might exist that civilians ought to be brought before the military court. But is it right? Especially when you look at a politicized matter, you have the executive who, we've said, the executive is under a specific political party, essentially. You have the president, the vice president, the prime minister, the cabinet. Those fall under a specific group. The appointments that have been made, no matter as much as we want to believe they've been made for our primary goal. It has also been considered keeping this particular group in power.
Of course.
Or maintaining certain structures has also been considered. Some might say that also impedes on the impartiality. I can see how this civilian in question this public member could question the impartiality of a group that is created, that is placed to maintain a certain system. I can see where they're coming into place. So how do you match your belief in the necessity of the military court with, first of all, the principle of separation of powers, for instance? That is a basic principle that from time after time has been the bedrock of any functional democratic society. So how do you match it?
Can I ask, maybe I feel like she would be placed to answer that, but I just want to be clear. Are you saying that because the head of the executive, or generally the head of the country, is the one that does the promotions and appointments in the army, are you saying that the army is an extension of the executive, or are you saying that the army is serving to further the aims of the current government? Because I would say in good conscience that every government, there is no government that wants to leave power. That's a fact of life. Yes. It's not just in Uganda. Nobody wants to lose power. That's why we have elections. That's why they keep contesting. That's why they do things that are good for people, you know, PDM, whatever, Myoga, whatever, you know, guys, get out of poverty, you know, get seedlings, get tea seedlings, get coffee, plant, get out of poverty. It's because they want to stay in power and they know this is what is good for people, this is what people want. No one wants to lose power, and in good conscience, are you going to get into government and you appoint people who don't like you? People who want you out? That's not going to happen. So I'm talking about the executive, I'm not talking about the army. The army is there for different purposes, and of course the head of state is the commander-in-chief. That's just the structure that we have.
Go ahead.
Okay, you know, I was looking at something to do with statecraft a while ago, and the idea of statecraft is that the people, especially in a democracy, the people choose people who they think would represent them, who they believe would represent their best interests, and put them in power to sort of manage them. You know, not literally, but like to handle things for them. And that is the entire basis of what's happening here. And also, when these people are in power, one of the reasons why the government must have an army is that the tools of violence must be monopolized by the people in power in order to avoid anarchy, right? So ideally, almost every democracy I know, the commander-in-chief is the president or the head of state, for that matter, because certain decisions have to be made well without the channels and the bureaucracy that you usually go through, because they need snap decisions. They need a command, and these decisions are made, especially those to do with national security. However, I think the reason why we are having this conversation is the fact that even with the mindset that we need not repeat the history of turbulence that we've had, and the fact that all institutions in the country were charged with protecting human rights of civilians, of all persons really, but now civilians are being seemingly persecuted under these laws. It seems
persecuted or prosecuted? That is a very good.
No,
strong term.
Persecuted. I say persecuted. I said seemingly.
Seemingly persecuted.
It's why there is a lot of outrage, because it looks like the person who was entrusted with power is not. The people entrusted with power are abusing it, and they're doing it in collusion with the people who are supposed to protect the interests of everyone else. I believe that is the entire reason why there is outrage, and it's the entire reason why we are questioning some of these things. And I don't think that it is illegitimate, because it seems to have come with a certain trend, and the political year usually brings it out the most. That is my opinion. That's my honest opinion.
Can I ask her a question?
Please. I love this.
If you say that okay, it is, things do get political because everything is politics in a country.
Absolutely.
Even in homes, politics begins at home. You know, it's all about how do you navigate. Okay, you want something from your husband. How do you talk to him? To give him his favorite meal. Okay, as a child, you want this very kids these days want iPhones. You know, how do you talk to your dad? You can do all your chores, do everything they tell you you're supposed to do, be an A+ student, because you are trying to curry favor with your partner, with your parent, with your community. Politics at the smallest unit is in the home. So everything is politics. Obviously, we cannot expect homes to have politics and then the government to not have politics. So I would ask you, if you say that it is seeming persecution, I go back to my thing of saying, of course, disclaimer, not everyone is equal, right?
Yeah.
But if you are being, okay, it's kind of multi-pronged, but it is the same question. If they say Nancy has guns, she's planning to overthrow the government by use of force, what does that mean? There's going to be loss of lives, civilians are going to die, the economy is going to suffer because investors are going to run away. Nobody wants to be in a war zone. No one wants to carry out business in a war zone. People are going to leave the country. You are going to obviously have brain drain. The smartest people are going to leave the country. Those who have the ability anyway are going to leave the country. And then if they say Nancy has guns and therefore she has brought herself under the jurisdiction of the General Court Martial, do you believe that by bringing Nancy to court martial, I mean, the decision at the end will be the decision at the end with the evidence that's presented? But would you say that Nancy is being prosecuted, or would you say by bringing persecuted? Would you say by bringing Nancy to court martial, they're actually trying to protect the country?
Thank you for asking that question. Right?
And also, now, that is point number one. Point number two. This is a bit controversial, but for me, I don't think it is. The military has come out so many times, and I think they're being quite lenient. I could be killed for this, but they've been quite lenient in even having to stress several times that, please, people, stop wearing things, and you know where this is going. Stop wearing things that could confuse people and make them believe that you are part of the military. They don't have to do that. The UPDF Act is very clear. The Gazette is clear. All these things are gazetted. They are very clear on that point. But even I believe that them coming to say that, guys, please, we've told you so many times, these things are for the army, you're just trying to confuse people. You know, so a person who is not so aware, someone who just knows, for example, now maybe let me just get straight into it. For someone who knows military police wears red berets. That's all we know. Maybe you attended law school at Makerere University, you witnessed a strike, you saw the people coming with chiboko. You know the people who are whipping you. The main feature you are looking at as you're running away is the red beret, right? You know this is military police. And let's say maybe you are not so in touch with what certain political parties are doing with themselves and what they're, you know, what they decide to do, what they decide to wear. You see people, a group of people moving with red berets. Your association with it is military police. Are you going to first come closer and see that inside here there are words that are saying people power? What? No. You're going to know this military police, which comes with chiboko, and it could confuse you in a bit of a way, right? But I'm just trying to say the laws are clear. To avoid being tried, try to not break the law. Especially if they tell you so many times, don't do a certain thing, and then now you keep doing this certain thing, and then they bring you to the court martial because you seem to want to be a soldier without actually going through training. And now let's get into it. There are some that you see. There is a picture that I have which haunts me. I think I took a screenshot of that in 2020. There's a lady wearing that red beret, wearing things, pips and all, with these I don't know what they are called, with these, these things that soldiers wear, and you have these things, you have something like a fake pistol here, you're wearing military boots. What's the issue? I believe that if you love the uniform so much, go through the training. People earn that uniform, and I think we need to respect it more than we do. If the army is begging you literally, please, stop wearing this. Who else do we know who insistently, I mean, apart from the people I said are not special, like the musicians who people say support government and they wear those things. The other people that we know, I mean, I will say this without fear of contradiction, are rebels who wear things that look like military uniform.
Did we have a history of actual politicians in the sitting regime wearing non-military personnel, wearing uniforms? Military uniforms. We had a minister last year.
That's why I said not everyone is equal. That was my disclaimer. But I'm saying if it's an entire group of people, like you doing it in your home, you're doing a TikTok video, that's a thing, right? And maybe you're not going to be prosecuted because you carry favor with the government. But if it's an entire group of people doing this thing consistently, and even still when these people who are government supporters do it, the army still comes out and says something. But now you're a group of people who are doing this en masse. That is very dangerous, I will say. That is very... Have you seen M23 rebels? If you take a quick look, you can think this is a real soldier. But these are rebels. And I think we need to appreciate that more.
That they have warned us against it?
Yes, that they've warned us against it. And this is actually wrong. If you want to take power through elections. You know, we all love democracy. We love to talk about it. It's a very easy way for you. If you want to wear the uniform, just go for training. They're always recruiting. Would you say that's persecution?
No. Let me tell you something. I think we're losing sight of the conversation, which is the fact that there is this
at the end of it all, you could be a civilian tried for wearing that uniform. That's the thing.
True. That there is this body that is not impartial at all. Despite its obvious claims that it's very impartial, there is this body that has double standards in terms of the military, and its associations with, its courts and all those things. But also the fact that it takes orders from certain people, and then it makes everything a battle of survival for everyone else, which is what we're discussing right now. The fact that there are people who may be innocent in good conscience, people who are innocent, and they're in these places because they're being targeted because they oppose the sitting government.
How do they oppose the government?
They oppose the government because they want to come and take power through lawful means. I come here and I tell you that, have you never heard of a person being taken to the court martial and there was no evidence? A person in politics.
I want to ask, what is the evidence against Dr. Tumwesigye?
I'm not aware of it. I'm constrained in talking about it because the case is still going on.
Of course.
Well, anyway.
But anyways, I just wanted to, I think one of the questions here is not whether or not possession of illegal firearms is wrong. I think generally as sensible citizens would agree it is right.
That is wrong.
It is completely wrong.
Yes.
But the question is it being tried in the right place?
That's
because the law might say that it is the right place, but we have had history. History has told us that the law is not always. Later on in life, we recognize it. Apartheid is a good example. The law was like, oh yes, we must discriminate, we must segregate. Yeah. But sensible people say, but no, this is not right.
This is ugly.
And then we say we're being honored by the military by telling us that it's wrong to wear their uniform. And yet, one of the things that is under defense is ignorance. how do you expect the average citizen to not be ignorant if you do not do your process? We need to hold the judiciary to a certain standard, a standard in regards to educating the citizens about the law. The law can exist that is right, and I, as a citizen, I have a duty to actually go and peruse it. But we must be aware of of this country we live in. Not everyone has, first of all, access to a constitution, or even we might say, oh, it's just online, but even a data bundle is unaffordable. Now, if the government goes ahead and does,
even has a phone to
exactly.
access internet.
Well, maybe you can do a radio program educating the citizens. That doesn't mean that they have gone the extra mile for me. That means that they have done their duty as a government.
Thank you.
To me as a citizen. And I think we ought to appreciate that. We are owed something as citizens. No one is giving us grace by actually going the extra mile. But I think I've deviated a bit.
No, I think we're still on point. Actually, I would ask you. I mean, in law school there was this joke that the law is not your mother, and the law is there for order. Of course, there are certain things that need to be done to educate people more. But on this topic of military courts and civilians, do you believe genuinely that the people that we've seen tried in these courts are people who have no access at all to information regarding what is right and wrong in terms of firearms? Do you believe that?
I think I would counter that by saying we've started off with a presumption of guilt.
No, I'm just saying they are suspected of having these firearms, and they are arraigned in a military court. Now, this person who is arraigned in a military court, for example, Dr. Theresa Tumwesigye, do you think he does not know the law?
I think he doesn't know. That's why we utilize. I think he does know.
Genuinely?
I think he does know. Rather.
Okay.
Especially with his history.
Yes.
But I also would like to emphasize the fact that we utilize a certain terminology, allegedly,
Yes,
because we owe these people the presumption of innocence. Constitutionally, we owe them the presumption of innocence.
It's the only way we can have a fair hearing to begin with.
Exactly. So mine is that whether or not they have access to this information is a whole other matter. The matter in question is it right for him to be a retired military person back in the military court? Is that the right place for a civilian to be tried for any matter, except, there are certain delicate matters that really would need to go back to the books on record and say, yes, this is right, I mean, this isn't. Because let me put this into context. Matters of civilians owning, or rather individuals owning firearms illegally came in sometime after, when the UPDF Act was being passed. That was one of the things that they included there. But would it not have been another dynamic for you to just add it to another existing act?
there is actually the Firearms Act.
No.
Talks about it as well.
Like, let me just say a pre-existing application.
Law.
Act, rather, I feel application, a pre-existing law. Mine is that I think it came in as a point of convenience to just bundle it all up together, either as a point of convenience or as a point to get certain things done. So you would rather, as opposed to amending or another situation entirely, you just bundle it up in the UPDF Act, get it passed, and then get it across that bridge. But is it the right place to have it? That's a question for another day.
In my head also, it's like the circumstances surrounding everything just keep us sus.
What's
suspicious because it's like no one is going through proper channels anymore. It's like it's like things are just happening at a neck break pace, and the first person informing us that a high profile person has been arrested, it's not like the media, it's not like
it's his wife.
It's his wife who is saying my husband has disappeared, and then later on they say we're bringing him to court now.
I mean, of course, you would expect a wife to know when her husband is missing.
No, after initially denying. We don't know where he is. We don't know. Sure. And yet the wife is coming out to tell us, but I've received word from military personnel that my husband has been arrested by the military. He's now going to be brought. And for days, there were denials. Well, also outright denials. There were avoidance of the conversation entirely.
Yes,
but due process.
I'm not aware of military processes and how they should run. I cannot speak to what they were doing during that time. Maybe they know more than we all know about why they did what they did, what is going on. So I think it would be very speculative for me to say this is not due process, because I am not a military person. But as a Ugandan, and seeing, and also maybe because of where I come from, and constantly trying to see what the military is doing, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I will say that, because we have tasted instability in the country, and not even just previous regimes. You know, some of us come from districts that are right on the border with Congo. So we know instability, and we know what the army has done to kind of calm people down. We are neighbors to Rwanda. I mean, Uganda is a neighbor to Rwanda. We have seen instability, and we know what the army has done. I mean, everybody knows that these guys are part of the UPDF, right? The liberation, right? We have seen what has been done. We have South Sudan. I have friends from South Sudan, refugees from South Sudan. We know what the military has done to bring stability. We know what they've done to evacuate Ugandans in those countries. We know what they did to evacuate Ugandans in Sudan. And I have Sudanese friends, and I can tell you a strong military is very important. So for me, I am not so quick on the basis of a few civilians being tried in a military court to say there is no due process, because things take time. Maybe there is no due process, right? In this particular instance, maybe it's just political. I don't know. But I'm just saying I would not be so quick to say the military is not working for Ugandans.
When the constitution was passed and the first cases were had in regards to the constitution, would one say, if there was a mistrial in any of those cases, that it takes time, guys? Just a few people. It takes time, though.
Sacrifice these people for the greater good.
We'll
get there.
But it takes a few. We don't offer you grace when you have done something wrong, when it is established. We don't offer you grace, because the situation has been, the dynamics have been established legally. Now, to offer you grace at these are people's lives. You only live one life.
Yes, of course.
If you believe you're a Christian, then you're going to heaven to wave palm leaves forever.
Oh wow!
you only live one life, and that life ought to be wholly lived. That is what we are owed as citizens: the opportunity to live our lives wholly. If you are the victim of a mistrial,
the sacrificial lamb,
of a process, the Isaac to our Abraham. Then, and the ram is not coming this time, then that is there's a saying that it's better to have 1,000 criminals free than having one innocent man jailed. Of course, some might question that.
Someone might question that.
But we get the message that is trying to be sent, that we owe someone who is innocent.
Yeah.
The dignity, because that could be one of us. Every time something goes wrong, I remember that if I celebrate this, it could be me one day. We ought to apply that sense to all these things.
But
I think you're presuming innocence.
But also, as a person who has not had the very protective side of the army, I don't want to give them so much grace, because the first time I voted was in 2021. 2021. It was the very first time I voted, and I was excited. I woke up really early, and like I went to the queue. Of course, there were already a lot of people, but the thing is, my polling station was at Chira, at Chaliwa Jala in Chira. At that point, we had so many army men, which I hear is a very normal thing during election time, to protect votes, to keep the peace and all that. But for me, one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that at some point I had someone standing behind me, and I can swear there was something that was a gun at my back, and I didn't know what to do. I froze. I didn't move.
Any threats made?
Did they threaten you?
No threats were made, but it just
You were scared.
I was
Yeah.
terrified. I even asked myself, is this legal? Because I remember after voting, I quickly rushed out of there and like, you know, in a neighborhood where everyone kind of knows everyone, they were like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Nothing happened to me. But like, I just needed to get home. And then it's going online and seeing that I am not the first person who has had that happen to them during those elections, like after the period, people who were beaten up at their polling stations.
Okay.
It's not the very first.
Could he have also just been voting and he just had his hand?
Yeah, maybe he held it wrong.
Maybe. Do you believe it influenced your vote negatively in a certain direction?
No,
He
it
consciously.
didn't. I already knew what I was going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay then.
Mm.
So no, but I mean, as someone, I would like to say that as Ugandans, we're all in a certain way, and I would like to give the military the benefit of the doubt. In the places they have done right, they have done right.
They've done right, yes.
And I believe every day that I'm sitting here, I'm standing under the umbrella of the protection of the
Yes.
military to a certain extent. Though my life might be threatened sometimes as a civilian, I also do not negate the fact that we all stand under. They're brave sons and daughters that go out there, and we ought to appreciate them.
And dying for our country.
Yeah. That is unmatched. It's unmatched. It's not everyone who is brave enough to actually sign up into the armed forces. But one of the things that breaks my heart is the fact that someone who is willing to go out there and die for these people could come and meet almost the same type of injustice on the people that they die for. I feel like it's a wasted effort when you think about it in that perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
It's a misutilized unit to some extent.
Yes.
But we cannot negate the fact that, ladies, rather, we have come to the close of our show.
We have.
Yeah, we have come to the close of our
soon.
show. It just felt like time was, as you say, fast-tracked.
Yeah.
So I will just ask you to give us your brief closing remarks in regards to this conversation. It's been a very dynamic conversation, and I think it's one that requires a lengthy amount of time. It requires a bit more information in all our parts, and it requires a great deal of patience.
Yes.
Patience and endurance. So I will start with Theresa, and then move on to Nancy, and we can follow with the show.
Okay. My closing points would say, for me, kind of repeating what I've been saying, I think that it is important for all of us to have faith in our country, to believe in our country. And I'm not saying believe in the ruling party. I'm saying believe in the potential of our country. Chinese see the potential of our country, and they're here, they're making a lot of money. Indians see the potential in our country, and they're making a lot of money. So I think it's very important for us to see the potential that we have, to see the soils that we have, the resources that we have to actually grow as a country and to take advantage of the security that we have. Of course, there's no country that's perfect, but at least you're not in the US, you're moving on the street and someone just shoots you dead, right? But I'm just, it's not going to happen. Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you live peacefully, Uganda is a good country. And I think to live peacefully, we have to first of all appreciate what we have. We must appreciate our country. We are lucky to be Ugandans. This is a good country. This is our home. Let's not try to burn down our home. And elections are coming up. The fact is, if you die, you've died to your family. People move on. So let's not try to burn things to the ground for the sake of politics, for the sake of fighting for somebody. I was about to say they'll make a movie out of you and go to Hollywood, but you'll be dead. Your family will mourn you. So let's love our country, love our families, and try to be peaceful and, analyze things a little bit more on all our parts, yes.
Okay, thank you, Theresa. Nancy, the floor is yours.
In a book that I read a while back, it's called The Political Feminist Theory. It had a very funny chapter about about quarrel defense, literally about feminists quarreling about this whole thing of the rights of man, because the elites there and the writers and the politicians of that time, the Rousseaus, and all of them were talking about rights of man. They meant it literally.
Of man.
Yes, they meant it literally, like the rights of man, the rights of men, and without the women. So when they came out, when they asked them that question about the position of women, and these people came out and they were like, women by affiliation to men kind of absorb those rights. I'm paraphrasing, they didn't say that. And this feminist was someone who had rallied behind Rousseau because his ideas were so she felt really betrayed, and she wrote a whole quarreling with him, and she was like, I believed in you. This is the stuff that you're doing.
Rooting for you.
Yeah. So I feel like this is the type of thing that we're seeing this political year. This is the type of thing that we see in the politics of this country, because people rally behind someone who represents the ideas that they believe is for everyone, and yet these are ideas that are isolated to them. And for me, I believe it's the cause of a whole lot of chaos. It's the reason why some people believe that they're not represented. It's the reason why some people are out there going to the streets. It's the reason why some people are like, let me try this political thing for myself, because in their homes, they just don't get that anymore. They don't feel represented anymore. And this election year, I think is going to even see more people come up. More people come up and say, I want to do this thing myself, and get it to my people as well. We keep hearing people saying, it's my turn to eat. It's a real thing.
Yes.
It's our turn to eat. It's a real thing, because they believe that they've been isolated and they've been left out. And thinking of where our country has come from, one of our biggest challenges has always been questions of people not getting the national cake, of people feeling left out. And I feel like we need to be conscious, even in all the steps that we take, in all the decisions that we take, to make sure that inequality is not glaring. Is not glaring, because that will take us back to the 80s, and it's not a time we want to go back to. Because people who have nothing to lose are dangerous people. They are dangerous people. And whether their stand is correct or not is just another thing. But the thing is, we're moving towards a time of radicalism, and we cannot stop it unless we try to equalize the platforms, or at least bring everyone to pace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies. This has been an invigorating conversation.
Very much.
I think this has been a brilliant way to open the year for myself. Very grateful to have had you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of yet another Tuesday afternoon show. This has been lovely. It has been lovely having you join us today. And in regards to the conversation we have had today, it is important to recognize that an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere, or could be an injustice everywhere. So as we are going ahead with this year, it is paramount that we first of all educate ourselves on what exactly is going on legally in our country, what exactly we are owed legally in our country, and what exactly is being delivered. But most of all, let us be our brother's keepers. Let us extend humanity and good conscience to everyone around us, and to those we have never met, those we will never meet. Let us just recognize that humanity is the basic standard. Once more, Happy New Year to you all. It has been lovely to have you join us. Have a great afternoon.